The horse lunged at the coffin in the middle of the funeral. People screamed. Some ran. Others froze. But one man stood still and looked into the horse's eyes, and in that instant he knew. The horse wasn't attacking. He was begging. 12-year-old Eli was pronounced dead just 2 days before. It happened quickly. A sudden fever. A fainting spell. He had collapsed in his bedroom, and by the time the paramedics arrived, there was no detectable pulse. The town doctor, who had treated the boy since birth, signed the certificate himself, cause of death, heart failure due to unknown complications. There was no autopsy. The family was too devastated. His mother had screamed so loud the neighbors came running. His grandfather didn't speak for hours. The entire village seemed to go still, as if the wind itself refused to carry such news. Eli was a quiet boy. Kind. Always barefoot in the fields, always laughing at things other kids missed. But what people remembered most was how he loved animals, especially one. His horse. A black Andalusian stallion named Vicar. Vicar had been wild when he first came to the family's land. No one could approach him. Everyone said he was untrainable. Dangerous. But Eli, just 7 at the time, had walked straight up to him in the pasture, raised a small hand, and said, "You're not scary. You're just waiting." That day, Vicar let him touch his face. Since then, they were inseparable. Eli brushed him every morning, fed him by hand, sang to him in the evenings. Vicar never let anyone else ride him. Never even allowed others near without flinching. But with Eli, he was gentle as a lamb. And now Eli was gone. And Vicar was alone. The funeral was small. The town chapel held just a few pews. The casket was closed, painted white, carved with delicate flowers. It was too small. Too still. They had tethered Vicar to an old oak far from the ceremony. The family didn't want to leave him home. Eli would have wanted him there, but no one trusted what the horse might do. Vicar had been restless since the boy's death. He hadn't eaten. Hadn't slept. He just stood in the field, head low, breathing hard, ears twitching constantly like he was waiting for something that never came. When the funeral began, he was still. But as the service went on, something shifted. It was subtle at first, his tail twitched. Then a low, guttural sound rumbled in his chest. No one noticed. Until he reared up, snapped the tether, and bolted. People turned at the sound of hooves pounding the earth. He was running toward them. Straight toward the chapel. Toward the coffin. Someone screamed. The pallbearers froze. The mother of the boy collapsed to her knees. A man reached for a pocket knife. But the boy's grandfather, old, hunched, eyes sharp, stepped forward and raised a hand. "Let him come," he said. The horse didn't charge the crowd. He ran straight to the coffin and stopped, panting, wild-eyed. Then he lifted one hoof and struck the side of the casket. Once. Twice. Again. People gasped. "Get him away. Call the vet, he's gone mad." But the grandfather didn't move. "Look at him," he whispered. Vicar pawed at the wood again. Then pressed his head against the lid. And stayed there. Not thrashing. Not screaming. Just pressing. Begging. The grandfather stepped closer. Something about the horse's eyes, wide, tear-glossed, locked on the coffin as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. "Open it," the old man said. The pastor shook his head. "Sir, no, this isn't." "Open it," he repeated. "Now." Silence. The mother sobbed, hands over her mouth. Finally, one of the men came forward. Shaking hands unscrewed the corner of the lid. Another joined. One by one, they loosened the top. Vicar backed away only a step. As the lid was lifted, the world stopped. The boy's face was pale. Still. Too still. But then, a twitch. The smallest flutter beneath his eyelids. One finger curled inward. A gasp. Someone shouted. The mother screamed. The boy's chest rose barely. But it rose. "He's breathing," someone yelled. The grandfather dropped to his knees. People rushed in. Someone called an ambulance. A nurse from the next village arrived within minutes. The boy was cold, but alive. Not dead. Not gone. Just locked in something doctors later called a suspended state, a misdiagnosed coma with no outward signs of life. His pulse had been undetectable. His body temp too low to register. He had been buried alive. Almost. And the only one who knew was the horse. As the medics lifted Eli from the coffin and loaded him into the back of the ambulance, he stirred. His eyes fluttered open. His lips parted. And he whispered one word. "Vicar." The horse stepped forward. And for a moment, man and beast simply looked at each other. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because something deeper had passed between them, something no machine, no monitor, no medicine could explain. The horse had heard something no one else could. Not a sound, but a bond. and he had refused to let them bury his best friend alive. The hospital room smelled like bleach and distant sorrow. Eli lay in a narrow bed, pale against the white sheets, a heart monitor softly beeping beside him. His eyes remained closed. His lips moved only slightly. But his chest rose and fell. His pulse was there, faint but steady. Doctors called it a miracle. Clinically, he was gone, one said. I can't explain it. Another nurse whispered in the hallway, it's like something pulled him back. But no one spoke aloud what everyone was thinking. Something had known he wasn't dead. Something with hooves. Vicar was not allowed inside the hospital. But every day Eli's grandfather brought him to the edge of the pasture near the back fence. From Eli's room, through the small window, you could just see the black silhouette standing there, waiting. At first, Eli didn't move. But 4 days after waking, when his fingers began to twitch again and his voice returned as a whisper, his first question was, "Is Vicar okay?" His mother sobbed so hard she had to leave the room. She returned minutes later with a photo. A shot from the pasture window. The horse, head low, eyes turned toward the building. Eli stared at it for a long time. Then whispered, "He came for me." The doctors called it Lazarus syndrome. The medics called it luck. But Eli's grandfather, with his weathered hands and silent eyes, said nothing at all. He just walked into the barn that week, built a brand new saddle by hand and carved one phrase into the leather beneath the horn. He knew. It took weeks for Eli to walk again. His muscles had gone soft. He was dizzy often, his breath shallow. But he never complained. He just asked one question again and again. When can I see him? On the 22nd day, they brought him back to the farm. It was late afternoon when the car turned down the gravel road. The sun spilled gold over the hills. Dust curled behind the tires. And at the far end of the pasture, a black figure stood frozen. The moment the door opened, Eli's hand gripped the edge of the window. The horse lifted his head. And then he ran. Straight across the field, thundering over the grass, tail flying behind him like a shadow let loose. Eli stepped out slowly, weak but standing. And Vicar stopped just feet away. They looked at each other. Boy and beast. Torn apart by death. Reunited by something stronger. Eli raised his hand. Vicar moved forward inch by inch until his forehead pressed into Eli's chest. No one spoke. No one dared to. Because in that silence, something was being rebuilt. Something holy. They walked together every day after that. Not far at first. Just around the barn. Then to the edge of the woods. Then along the old creek trail where Eli used to race him barefoot. Eli didn't remember the coffin. He didn't remember the prayers or the faces or the cries. But he remembered something else. I heard him, he told his mother one morning. Not words. Not sounds. Just him. Calling me back. His mother said nothing. She just cried quietly into her coffee. News of what happened spread. Reporters showed up. They wrote headlines like, "Boy buried alive saved by loyal horse." "Mourning stallion interrupts funeral and saves a life." They came with cameras and questions and science. But no one could explain what Vicar did. No one but Eli. And he didn't need to explain it. He just smiled and said, "He's my best friend." Months passed. Eli grew stronger. He returned to school though crowds overwhelmed him. He didn't like being called the boy who came back. He preferred to be the boy with the horse. He and Vicar trained again. But they didn't run like before. They walked. Together. Always side by side. And every year on the same date, March 14th, the family would gather in the back field. Not to mourn, but to remember. To honor the day Vicar broke the rules of nature to bring his boy home. And every year, Eli brought out a single white flower tied with a black ribbon. He didn't lay it on a grave. He didn't place it on a stone. He tucked it into the strap of Vicar's bridle. And whispered thank you. Because he had been silent in death. But Vicar had spoken for him. And the world had listened. The sky was overcast on the 1-year anniversary of Eli's almost funeral, but the family didn't mind. They gathered in the back pasture, boots and mud, jackets zipped tight. Vicar stood at the fence, tall and calm, ears flicking in the wind. He was older now. Just slightly. A few white hairs had begun to show at the edges of his mane. His muscles had filled in again after the strange winter when he stopped eating. But his eyes, they held something no animal should carry, memory. Eli stood beside him, taller now, stronger. He no longer used a cane. He hadn't needed it in months. What he did use still every day was Vicar. His presence. His quietness. His knowing. He brushed Vicar's neck slowly, fingers moving with the muscle and rhythm of someone who knew every dip and ridge by heart. No one spoke. They didn't need to. That pasture, that day, that moment, it didn't belong to words. Eli's grandfather stepped forward holding something wrapped in cloth. "It's time," he said. Eli nodded. He took the bundle carefully, unwrapping it with the reverence usually reserved for something sacred. Inside was the coffin lid. The original one. Cracked along the corners. Scratched with hoof marks. Still stained with the memory of dirt and grief and miracle. Eli didn't flinch. He touched the hoof-shaped dents gently. Then he pulled a wood burner from his jacket pocket. Quietly, methodically, he knelt in the grass and began etching words into the underside of the wood. Everyone watched, silent. The wind picked up. Birds scattered from a nearby tree. After 15 minutes, he stood. The words glowed, soft and dark. "When the world thought I was gone, he didn't." Eli looked up at Vicar. "And because he didn't, I came back." He turned to his mother, to his grandfather, to the few friends who had dared to come. "I don't remember the cold," he said. "Or the quiet. Or the darkness." He looked at Vicar again. "But I remember the sound of hooves. Like thunder. I remember the weight of his breath against my chest. I remember my name being pulled back into me." He stepped closer to the stallion and laid his head gently against Vicar's. "I remember love." His mother sobbed. But it wasn't grief. It was reverence. Behind them, the coffin lid was propped upright, displayed like a plaque. The old hoof marks, the scars, the story carved into it, it was no longer a piece of wood. It was a monument. To instinct. To faith. To the unbreakable, unreasonable belief of an animal that refused to let go. A week later, Eli's grandfather built a simple wooden stand for it. He placed it just outside the barn under the eaves where it would stay dry, but visible to everyone who walked through. Visitors would come from all over in the years to come. Tourists. Horse lovers. Skeptics. Believers. They all asked the same question. How did the horse know? And Eli, now grown, would always answer the same way. He didn't know like a human. He didn't think. He didn't guess. He would glance out the window at Vicar, still alive, still proud, still watching the pastures like a sentry. He felt it. Then he would smile. And he did something no one else dared to. When the tour was done, when the sun dipped behind the trees, when the barn was quiet again, Eli would slip outside with one apple in his pocket. He'd whistle. The soft kind of whistle that barely carried. And always Vicar would come. No halter. No rope. No lead. Just a boy and his horse. Older now, but still together. Still walking the same field where death had paused and love said not yet.